Okay, so this is a fairly common problem that comes up in the 015, 025 math levels. And for some reason, the people coming in, they always have trouble with the translations. It's just something they've never really got a good feel for. So I just want to walk through this real quick and how I would approach this. So you're given a statement and they want you to translate it. And the statement reads, 7 less than 3 times a number is 4 more than the number. And when I first sit down with them, that's what I'll do, is I'll read it through with them just because it helps hearing it and then just giving them somewhere to start. And whenever you're doing these, I always find it useful to just identify what x is. That's always a great starting place. So 7 less than 3 times a number, this little section right here, should correspond to x every single time because that's the number that we're looking for. Is, you can always say, is equals and so forth, and here's the number right there. So there's another one that's x. And a lot of times when I'm working with students, I'll draw arrows corresponding to what information this statement corresponds to. So looking at this whole thing, there's really two ways that you have where you can approach this. The first is that you can just read it left to right and write down each term as you go. And the key to these is to break it down into small chunks. Oftentimes I'll underline it as I'll go through the whole thing. So when I see 7 less than, you've got to be careful with this statement. A lot of times students want to write it as 7 less than whatever. But you can see that's obviously not right, because if I asked you what is 8 less than 10, you would say that's 2. But I don't write it this way, 8 less than 10. For some reason in English we actually read it backwards, and so what needs to happen with the less than is that you need to flip it. Like so. And what I'll do is I'll actually go left to right anytime, right to left, anytime that I see less than. So I would read this as 7 less than. The first thing I'm going to write down is 7 less than something. 7 less than what? Well, 3 times, explain to them that parentheses always mean multiplication, a number. So we've gone through 7 less than 3 times a number is 4 more than. Just out of habit, whenever I see less than or more than, I'll still stick to the right to left just for consistency. So 4 more than the number. There we go. There's our equation. That's the first technique, is where you just read it left to right and you just write down the stuff as you go. And a lot of times I'll underline it just to keep track of where it was that we left off. And then you would simplify from here, and that's how you would approach that. The other way that you have is that you can divide the sentence into 3 or 4 words at the most and handle each piece separately. A lot of times they get tripped up because they want to approach it all at the same time. It's like they read the whole sentence and they just throw their arms up and they're like, I don't get it, it's horrible. And we just want to help them overcome that, and so just calm them down and have them underline it, a lot of times block it off, just 3 or 4 words at a time, every time they feel that there's something that should be separated. And so looking at this, I would start with 7. 7 less than. That's a great way to block that whole thing off there. 7 less than something. And then we've got 3 times a number. That'd probably be another great spot to take a chunk there. Is should always be blocked off by itself. 4 more than the number. And that's how I would divide it off. And when you have them block it off like this, now it makes a little more sense when you go through the whole thing. Missing a little piece there. So I could do this in any order I want. The key is that it has to line up in the end. So I'll just start with is, because that's a great anchor point, is to know what and when the two are equal to each other. I could even go on the right side here. It is 4 more than the number. Well, 4 more than, we can write like this. 4 and something, 4 more than, 4 more than. That's helpful too. Whenever you're iterating over things, if you point to it and you would say 4 more than as you go through all of it, then it starts to make sense as you're explaining the whole thing. 4 more than what? Well, the number. So that's the entire right side there. Let's take a look at the left side. we have 7 less than 3 times a number. Let's actually break that up there. 3 times something. So I could write that to be 3 times something. Again, I'm using the parentheses just to identify that I don't care what it is that goes in there, it's just an empty space that we're going to fill in here in just a second. Well, 3 times what? 3 times a number, which we've declared to be x. If you don't drop your marker, that is. So, the last little bit that we haven't used, we've done the 4 more than, the number, the is right there. We've got that whole little statement there, the 3 times a number is right here. We've just got the 7 less than, which I would write like this. And those are the 2 different ways you have to break down those translations. Have the students practice that. They really get tripped up on the whole thing, but just take it slow, show them a couple of times how the whole thing works, and then let them give it a shot and see what happens.